Are you in Indianapolis?
Just outside of him.
Okay, yeah. I think maybe we talked about this. My roommate from college lived in Carmel.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. So I've been there a couple times to visit her.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Go visit the former vice president if you so desire. He's
Oh,
hanging his hat there right now.
Quill? Dan Quill, is it?
Well, Quayle's here,
Oh,
but
oh,
no,
oh, Pence.
uh,
Pence. Yeah.
and haven't stopped by with a plate of cookies or anything as of yet.
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. I know. It's just all such a loaded topic for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. I used to like to talk about politics, and now I'm like, I can't even. I just.
I'm sure it never comes up with your novels.
Oh, well, it's kind of. I mean, it's what I like is, especially during War of 1812, of realizing how bad off we were politically, and we came through that. And it's an era that most people don't even know about. Like they don't know that. I mean, the division was much deeper than it is now, and it's an era in our history that we don't even think about. And if we came through that, we could come through this, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's the alternative?
I know, but it
Yeah,
is, it's, because obviously we know about the Civil War. People are much more interested in the Civil War, I think, and the Revolutionary War than the War of 1812. But it's like we almost lost our country completely, and it came so close. And most people don't even know. I mean, I didn't know until I started researching it. I had no idea how dire things really were. So it was kind of refreshing, and that was the time of duels. And people were dueling on in the Hall of Representatives, and when war was declared in the War of 1812, like the whole northern states went into mourning, and they hung their flags at half-mast, and they closed their schools, they closed their shops, they tolled funeral bells. So meanwhile, the southern states and the western states were like having a huge party. They were having parades, they were having fireworks. I mean, it was just absolute opposite reactions, and just like complete and total division. So it's just kind of amazing that by the end of the war that we all pulled together. And the war itself created a sense of nationalism that we didn't have before. So it's very inspiring.
So, I mean, it's like, I don't know, is that silver lining type stuff, or do we look at that as part of the process of how we got to where we are? Not necessarily because that has to be the process, but it simply was.
It simply was. It was just something we had to live through, because when we look at James Madison, he was sworn in 1809, and we were only 20 years old then. George Washington was sworn in 1789. So if we think back, now that we're in 2022, which is mind-boggling in itself, if we think back to 20 years ago, 2002, that our president then was George W. Bush, and our favorite TV show was Friends. And if we try to grasp the concept of what if our country just started in 2002, like it just shows how young our country was at that point, that we had won the war, we had won the peace, but we didn't really know what to do with it. We knew we didn't want to be a monarchy, but we didn't really know what that meant. And we had Thomas Jefferson answering the door as president, looking like a farmer and holes in his slippers because he didn't want to appear monarchical, but we didn't really have any traditions. We didn't have a sense of Americanness. I mean, even back then, people would say the United States are. They wouldn't say the United States is, because it was so regional. Everybody identified by their individual state much more than as an American. And it was at the end of the War of 1812 that people started to say the United States is, that we were unified enough to have that single identity as one, which, I mean, that just gives me the chills every time I think about it. Just how our sense of nationalism arose basically because from the ashes of Washington City, that even these Federalists who had opposed the war so vehemently at the start were so outraged by the British marching in and burning down all of our public buildings that all of a sudden everyone was united against the British, and everybody dug in for the Battle of Baltimore, and people poured in from all over the country, all ages, shapes, genders, sizes, and worked around the clock for 2 weeks until the British invaded there and were able to push them back. So people that And even Francis Scott Key, he was a distant cousin of Dolley Madison's, and he's the one who wrote our national anthem, Star Spangled Banner. And he was a Federalist. At the beginning of the war, he called the war an abominable lump of wickedness. And there he is watching the Battle of Baltimore, and he's the one writing the land of the free and the home of the brave. And it's just like, he's such a perfect example of how public opinion changed really overnight with the burning of Washington City. So so now it's like, when I hear the anthem, I just have, there's so much more to it than what the average American knows. So it's neat to understand the background of it, because he was basically on a British ship. He was trying to free an American prisoner who was on there, and the British said, sure, you can take him, but you can't leave till after the battle. You're going to have to sit here and on the deck and watch, and he's going to be below decks. We can't let you leave now because you both have seen and heard way too much. So that's why he had the front row seat to the battle, and then basically scribbled down the poem on, just loose pieces of paper that he was able to find. And then they printed up on broadbills, and then it became hugely popular, and then it was set to the tune of a popular drinking song at the time. So I'm not sure if that's the same tune that it is now. I think it's a different one, but yeah, it's
sure it would arouse folks in a pub later on in the evening. It's a nice tune.
Yeah, but yeah, imagining the drunken people trying to hit those high notes, that's a little scary.
Well, anybody who's been to a ball game doesn't have to imagine that, I don't think.
True, yeah.
that is an American tradition, I think, that
yes.
is proudly carried on.
That's a very good point.